The sound of flesh hitting bone echoed through the dining room, silencing the forced conversation. My mother-in-law had just slapped my 9-year-old son across the face hard enough to send him tumbling to the floor. She screamed he was a clumsy outsider polluting her family table. Everyone froze, waiting for my reaction. They expected tears. They expected me to grab my child and run away sobbing. But I did not shed a single tear. Instead, I looked her dead in the eye and delivered a 6-word sentence that dismantled her entire life. Before I reveal what happened next, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever protected your child from toxic relatives. I am Valerie, 33 years old, and a forensic auditor by trade. My job is to find hidden truths in tangled webs of lies, and I am exceptionally good at it. I married David 5 years ago, bringing my sweet boy Leo into what I thought was a welcoming family. I was terribly wrong. The Thanksgiving dinner was held at our sprawling estate in Chicago. I had spent days preparing the meal, orchestrating a flawless evening to appease David and his demanding mother, Beatrice. The dining room looked like a magazine spread featuring Beatrice's prized Italian silk tablecloth. We were seated around the massive mahogany table. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Leo was sitting quietly beside me, trying his best to use the heavy silver cutlery. He was a gentle child who always tried to please people. As Leo reached for the cranberry sauce, his small fingers slipped on the condensation of his water glass. The heavy crystal tipped over, sending a tidal wave of ice water and dark red gravy straight across the pristine white Italian silk. It was a complete accident. Leo gasped and scrambled to grab his napkin, apologizing profusely. Before I could reach over to help him, Beatrice lunged across the table. Her hand came down with vicious speed, striking Leo directly across his cheek. The crack of the slap was deafening. The force of the blow threw my tiny boy backward, knocking his chair over and sending him crashing onto the hardwood floor. He let out a sharp cry of pain, clutching his face. I expected David to leap up to defend his stepson. Instead, my husband did not even flinch. He kept his eyes glued to his smartphone, scrolling through his emails as if his mother had merely swatted a fly. He took a sip of his wine and muttered that Leo needed to be less clumsy. I stared at the man I had married, feeling a cold realization wash over me. Across the table, my sister-in-law Chloe rolled her eyes and scoffed. She took a delicate bite of her turkey and sneered. "What did you expect, mother? You cannot bring a stray dog into a pedigree home and expect it to behave like a purebred. He does not share our bloodline. He will always be a messy outsider." The sheer cruelty of her racist comment hung in the air. Chloe always looked down on Leo, treating him like a peasant who had invaded their court. Beatrice nodded in agreement, towering over my crying son. She pointed a manicured finger at him and shrieked for him to get out of her sight before he ruined the holiday. Before I could unleash the fury boiling inside me, another chair scraped violently against the floor. Marcus, my brother-in-law, stood up. Marcus is a brilliant tax lawyer, a strong black man who had always been treated with subtle microaggressions by Chloe and her family. He shoved his chair back hard. He marched around the table and knelt beside Leo, helping my son to his feet. Marcus shielded Leo with his body, turning his imposing frame toward Beatrice. His voice was dangerously low and steady. "Do not ever lay a hand on this child again, Beatrice. If you even think about touching him, I will personally ensure you regret it for the rest of your miserable life." Beatrice scoffed, crossing her arms. "How dare you speak to me that way in my son's house, Marcus? You are just a guest here." I stood up slowly, smoothing the front of my dress. I did not scream. I did not cry. My forensic auditor brain had already processed the situation and calculated the exact formula to destroy them. I walked around the table, pulling a soft cloth from my pocket. I knelt beside Marcus and gently wiped the tears from Leo's face, checking his cheek. I kissed his forehead. I stood back up and faced Beatrice. The room was dead silent. David finally looked up from his phone, annoyed by the interruption to his dinner. Chloe paused with her wine glass halfway to her mouth. I looked Beatrice in the eyes, my voice devoid of emotion. I articulated every single syllable with absolute precision. "This house belongs to my son." The silence stretched for 3 agonizing seconds. Then Beatrice threw her head back and let out a shrill, mocking laugh. She slapped the table, wiping a fake tear of amusement from her eye. "You are completely delusional, Valerie," she cackled. "Are you having a mental breakdown? My successful son David bought this gorgeous estate with his hard-earned bonus money. Your name is not even on the deed, you pathetic gold digger." David smirked, leaning back in his chair and shaking his head. "He told me to sit down and stop embarrassing myself." Chloe giggled, sipping her wine and whispering to Marcus to sit down. I did not break eye contact with my mother-in-law. A cold, calculating smile spread across my face. I slowly reached into my leather tote bag, resting on the chair beside me, my fingers wrapping around a manila envelope prepared specifically for this evening. I pulled the crisp parchment from the envelope, dropping it directly over the spilled cranberry sauce. The red stains seeped into the edges, but the bold black text remained perfectly legible. Official notice of eviction, issued by the sheriff's office. The names listed under the order to vacate were David Sterling and Beatrice Sterling. The dining room fell into a suffocating silence. It was the absolute quiet preceding a devastating storm. Beatrice stopped laughing. Her manicured fingers hovered over the document, her eyes scanning the red court stamp at the bottom. I watched the psychological shift happen in real time. The smug superiority melted off her face, instantly replaced by deep, paralyzing confusion. She looked at the paper, then up at me, then back down at the signature. David snatched the document from the table. His eyes darted rapidly across the legal jargon. I saw the exact second his brain processed the harsh reality. A thick blue vein in his neck pulsed. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving him looking like a ghost. He dropped the paper as if it burned his fingers. Chloe leaned over, desperately reading the text. Her jaw dropped in shock. "What is this, David?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why does this paper say you have to leave the property by 5 o'clock today?" I checked my watch. It was 4:45. They had exactly 15 minutes left to pack their miserable lives into boxes. "This is a sick joke," David growled, pushing his chair back so violently it crashed onto the floor. He marched toward me, his fists clenched tight, his face twisted into a dark mask of pure rage. "You think you can print fake legal documents and ruin Thanksgiving? You think you can embarrass my mother like this?" He stepped aggressively into my personal space, trying to use his height to intimidate me. He loomed over me, his chest heaving, his breath smelling of red wine. He raised his right hand, pointing a trembling finger between my eyes. "I want you to pack your bags and get out of my house right now, Valerie. Take your brat and leave before I make you." I did not blink. I did not flinch away. I stood perfectly still, channeling my professional composure. In my line of work, dealing with cornered fraudsters trying to intimidate me was a daily occurrence. David was no different than the corrupt executives I interrogated for a living. He was just another desperate man caught in a massive web of lies. "Do not point your finger at me, David," I said, my voice dropping to an icy whisper. "And do not threaten me or my son again." Marcus stepped forward, placing a firm hand on David's shoulder, shoving him back 2 feet. "Back off, David," Marcus warned, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "You are not going to lay a hand on her." David violently shook off Marcus' hand, glaring with pure hatred. "Stay out of this, Marcus. This is my house, and my wife is having a psychotic break. She is forging government documents to get attention because she is jealous of my mother." Beatrice suddenly found her voice. She stood pointing at me with a shaking hand. "You are completely insane, Valerie. You are an unhinged woman. I always knew there was something wrong with you. You forge an eviction notice for a house my son bought with his hard-earned money. I am calling the police right now and having you committed to a psychiatric ward." She reached frantically for her mobile phone, but I simply smiled. That cold, calm smile unnerved her more than anything else I could have done. She hesitated, her finger hovering nervously over the keypad. "Call them," I challenged, crossing my arms. "Call the police, Beatrice. I would love for the authorities to be here today. It saves the deputies the trouble of driving down to drag you out by the collar. That official eviction notice is real, signed by a judge and legally executed by the clerk." David let out a forced laugh, pacing in front of the ruined table. He ran a hand through his hair, looking around for validation. "You are full of it, Valerie. How could I be evicted from a house I legally own? How could my mother be evicted from a property I purchased with cash? You are bluffing. You printed this nonsense off the internet to scare us. I am a forensic auditor, David. I reminded him, taking a deliberate step toward him. My career is built on tracking money. I follow the paper trail. I find the hidden accounts. I expose the lies people tell to protect their fragile egos and fake wealth. You thought you were so smart. You thought I was an oblivious wife who would never question your late nights, your sudden business trips, your endless excuses about where the money was disappearing to. David froze in his tracks. His frantic pacing stopped instantly. The loud bravado he had been projecting vanished completely from his face. He looked at me with genuine naked fear in his wide eyes. He swallowed hard. How did you fake this? David demanded, his voice cracking slightly as the panic set in. Tell me right now how you forged these damn court papers, Valerie. I am not forging anything, David, I replied, maintaining my unyielding gaze. I am just reading financial data. You see, David, numbers never lie. People do. You have been lying to me, your mother Chloe, and yourself for a very long time. Your time has officially run out. I reached back into my tote bag and pulled out a second envelope. This one was much thicker and heavier. I unwound the red string holding the flap closed and pulled out a massive stack of official bank statements, loan agreements, and default notices. I slammed the stack of financial records onto the dining table right next to the eviction notice. Let us review your financial portfolio, David, I announced, tapping the documents. Since you love bragging about your massive wealth to your mother and your sister, it is only fair we share the exact financial details with them right now tonight. David lunged for the papers, but Marcus stepped effortlessly forward, completely blocking his path. Read them loudly, Marcus instructed, his deep voice echoing. Let us hear what the golden boy is hiding. 14 months ago, I noticed irregularities in our joint accounts. Small withdrawals at first. You claimed they were business expenses, client dinners, unexpected taxes. But I audit corporate fraud for a living. I see through offshore accounts every single day. Did you honestly believe your amateur attempts at hiding money would slip past me? David stood paralyzed, looking like a trapped animal. I pulled out a bank statement highlighting massive transfers. You opened a secret account, I explained, tossing the page toward Chloe. You funneled nearly $300,000 into a fraudulent investment scheme run by a guy you met at a golf course. A scheme that completely collapsed 8 months ago, leaving you with absolutely nothing. Beatrice gasped, clutching her pearls, staring at David with horror. David, tell me she is lying, Beatrice pleaded. Tell me you did not lose your bonus money on some internet scam. David could not meet her gaze, his silence serving as a devastating confession. But that was just the beginning of your financial ruin, I continued. Losing the money was not enough for you. You had to maintain the illusion of success. You had to keep buying Chloe designer bags for her birthday and flying your mother out to luxury resorts so you could remain the flawless patriarch. And let us not forget the other major drain on your finances. I pulled out a glossy printout, throwing it onto the table. It was a photograph of David sitting closely with a young blonde woman at a high-end restaurant sipping champagne. Meet Ashley, I said, gesturing to the photo. A 24-year-old aspiring model who enjoys luxury sports cars and penthouses. David has been paying the rent on her downtown luxury apartment for the past 11 months. He also bought her a brand new Mercedes SUV. Chloe grabbed the glossy photo, staring at it in utter disbelief. She looked up at David, her face contorted in absolute disgust. You bought a car for some random girl while you told me you could not afford to help me start my boutique, Chloe shrieked. You told me your funds were tied up in secure bonds. They were tied up, I agreed dryly. Tied up in Ashley and a Ponzi scheme. But here's the real tragedy of your little financial disaster, David. When the fake investments vanished and Ashley demanded her monthly allowance, you ran out of cash. You were completely broke, so you did the only thing a desperate, cowardly man could do. You secretly mortgaged this entire estate. Beatrice let out a strangled, painful cry, staggering backward until she hit the dining room wall. Mortgaged, she gasped, clutching her chest. But the house was paid off. You told me you owned it free and clear, David. He did own it, I corrected, until he took out a massive loan against it, exactly 11 months ago, forging my signature as a witness to push the paperwork through faster. He drained the equity of this entire property to cover his massive debts and keep his mistress happy. David finally found his voice, though it was incredibly weak and shaking. I was going to win it back, he stammered, taking a step toward his mother. Mom, I swear I had a plan. The market was supposed to rebound. I was going to pay off the loan before anyone noticed. But you did not pay it off, I stated bluntly, pulling out the final red-stamped notice. You defaulted. You missed 4 consecutive payments. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings. You ignored their calls. You threw away the warning letters. You let this beautiful home slip right through your fingers because you were too arrogant to admit you had failed. The illusion of the wealthy, flawless Sterling family was shattering into a million jagged pieces right in front of my eyes. Beatrice looked at the lavish dining room, the imported chandelier, the expensive art on the walls, and realized none of it belonged to them anymore. Her entire identity was wrapped up in her son's wealth, and now that wealth was proven to be a mirage. But David suddenly frowned, his brow furrowing as a spark of confusion temporarily overpowered his blind panic. Wait a minute, he said, his eyes darting from the foreclosure notice to the eviction order. If the bank foreclosed on the house, why is the eviction notice coming from you? The bank owns the property. Now, not you. You cannot evict us. A slow, chilling smile spread across my face. It was the moment I had been waiting for, the absolute ultimate checkmate. The bank certainly did own the property, David, I explained, my voice dropping to a smooth, satisfied cadence. But banks do not like holding on to defaulted residential properties. They prefer to sell off bad debt quickly to willing investors. When the bank put your defaulted mortgage up for private auction last month, a private buyer swooped in and purchased the debt entirely in cash. David stared at me, his breathing heavy and erratic. Who? He demanded loudly. Who bought it? I reached into my bag one last time and pulled out the crisp deed of ownership. I purchased your debt. David? I used the money from my personal business ventures and a private inheritance you knew nothing about. But I did not put the house in my name. I bought your debt through an irrevocable trust fund, a trust fund set up strictly and exclusively in the name of my 9-year-old son Leo. The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Leo, my 9-year-old boy, who was currently standing quietly behind Marcus, holding his tear-stained cheek, was the sole legal owner of the Sterling family estate. David staggered backward, hitting the edge of the dining table. He looked at me as if I had suddenly grown horns. You put the deed in his name, David whispered, his voice completely broken. You gave a multi-million-dollar property to a child who does not even share my blood. That is exactly right, David, I replied smoothly. He is the landlord now, and he does not tolerate tenants who hit him or disrespect his mother. Beatrice let out a dramatic wail, collapsing further into the wall as the sheer humiliation washed over her. She was going to be evicted by the very child she had just slapped. But before Beatrice could launch into another theatrical performance, Chloe slammed her wineglass down onto the table. The crystal shattered, sending glass shards and red wine flying across the ruined Italian silk. Enough, Chloe screamed, her face turning an ugly shade of crimson. I am sick and tired of listening to this absolute garbage, Valerie. You think you are so clever with your little auditing tricks and your secret bank accounts? You think you can waltz into our family, buy up some defaulted debt, and suddenly act like you own us? You are nothing but a commoner trying to play a high-stakes game? You do not even begin to understand. She stomped around the table, her high heels clicking aggressively against the hardwood floor. You really thought you could just evict us and walk away? Victorious. Chloe spat, pointing a jagged piece of broken crystal at me. You have completely lost your mind if you think the Sterling family is going to let some outsider steal our generational home. We will drag you into court so fast your head will spin. We will bury you in endless litigation until you are entirely bankrupt. I will personally hire the most ruthless corporate litigators in Chicago to rip that fraudulent trust fund apart piece by piece and leave you begging on the streets. I did not flinch. I just watched her throw her tantrum. Chloe was just getting started. She paced furiously in front of the window, waving her arms to emphasize her perceived superiority. You see, Valerie, you might have saved up a few pennies from your little corporate jobs, but you do not know what real wealth looks like. We come from a legacy. My grandfather built an empire in this city. He set up an ironclad trust fund for this family that contains more money than you will ever see in 10 lifetimes. It is untouchable generational wealth. We have an ocean of capital sitting offshore, just waiting to crush pathetic little gold diggers like you. She turned to David, who was still staring blankly at the floor. David, stop looking so pathetic, Chloe commanded, her voice shrill and commanding. So what if you made a bad investment? We are Sterlings. We do not lose to people like her. We will just tap into grandfather's trust fund tomorrow morning. We'll pay off whatever ridiculous amount she paid for the debt, and then we will countersue her for emotional distress, forgery, and extortion. We have millions upon millions of dollars at our disposal. We can freeze her accounts, we can destroy her career, and we can make sure she never works in finance again. Beatrice seemed to recover slightly at the mention of the trust fund. She nodded vigorously, stepping away from the wall and smoothing her dress. Chloe is right, Beatrice declared, finding her arrogant tone once more. My late husband made sure this family would never be vulnerable to greedy outsiders. That trust fund is our fortress. You really thought you cornered us, Valerie, but you forgot who you are dealing with. We have the resources to tie you up in court for the next 20 years. You will spend every dime you have trying to defend your sons. Little trust. And in the end, we will take the house back and leave you with nothing. Chloe smiled, a wicked, triumphant smile crossing her arms over her chest. Consider yourself warned. Valerie, you brought a knife to a gunfight. By tomorrow afternoon, our lawyers will have an injunction against this eviction, and by next week you will be served with a massive lawsuit. I let her finish her little speech. I let her paint this magnificent picture of endless riches and untouchable power. It was fascinating to watch them cling to a phantom safety net. They were so blinded by their own arrogance that they never bothered to verify if the safety net was actually there. I stood perfectly still, my posture relaxed, my face giving nothing away. I did not need to raise my voice or argue with Chloe. I did not need to defend myself against her ridiculous threats of litigation. I already knew the truth about their grandfather's legendary wealth, and I knew I did not have to be the one to break the bad news. I simply shifted my gaze past Chloe and looked directly at Marcus. Marcus, who had stood silently guarding Leo through this entire explosive tirade. Marcus, the brilliant tax lawyer who handled all of the Sterling family finances. As Chloe continued to rant about their endless millions, a low, deep chuckle rumbled from Marcus' chest. The sound was so dark and bitter it instantly cut through Chloe's screaming. Marcus slowly reached up and took off his wire-rimmed glasses, folding them carefully. He looked at his wife with an expression of pure, unadulterated pity. He shook his head, letting out another cynical laugh. Do you want to tell them about the trust fund? Chloe Marcus asked, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. Or should I be the one to break the news to your dear brother and your mother? Marcus finished, letting the question hang heavily in the dining room. Chloe stared at her husband, her arrogant sneer faltering. What are you talking about, Marcus? She demanded, her voice losing its shrill edge. The trust fund is managed by the senior partners at your firm. You handle our tax filings. You know exactly how much money is in those offshore accounts. Tell them, Marcus. Tell Valerie how much power we have behind us. Marcus did not move. He stood like a pillar of stone, his dark eyes fixed on Beatrice. I know exactly how much is in those accounts, Chloe, he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. I know down to the very last cent, because I am the one who had to file the zero balance reports with the Internal Revenue Service 6 months ago. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of quiet that precedes a devastating explosion. Chloe blinked rapidly, her brain failing to process the words. Zero balance, she repeated slowly, as if speaking a foreign language. What do you mean, zero balance? That is impossible. Grandfather left us over $20 million. The interest alone covers our lifestyle. Marcus, look at my mother. Tell Valerie you are joking. Marcus did not look at Valerie. He kept his eyes locked onto Beatrice, who was suddenly shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. I am not joking, Chloe, Marcus said, stepping away from the table and gesturing toward the matriarch of the Sterling family. The Grand Untouchable. Sterling Trust Fund. The great fortress of generational wealth you just spent 5 minutes screaming about does not exist anymore. It is gone, all of it. Every single penny was drained, dried up, and wired to unregulated offshore entities half a year ago. David grabbed the edge of the dining table, his knuckles turning white. Marcus, you are lying. David growled, his panic rising again. That money is locked in a restricted trust. Mother receives a monthly stipend, but she cannot touch the principal. No one can touch the principal without signatures from all 3 beneficiaries. That was the whole point of grandfather's design. That is how a normal trust operates. David Marcus agreed, nodding slowly. But your mother was never normal. She is incredibly resourceful when she is desperate. She forged your signature. David, she forged Chloe's signature too. She presented fabricated board resolutions to the trustees, claiming the family needed to liquidate assets to secure a massive commercial real estate venture in Dubai. Since the trustees trusted the great Beatrice Sterling, they pushed the paperwork through without calling either of you to verify. It was a masterful stroke of corporate fraud. Beatrice let out a whimpering sound, backing away until she bumped into a decorative credenza. It is not true, she gasped, her voice barely audible. He is making this up to help Valerie steal our house. Marcus let out another harsh laugh. Reaching into his jacket pocket, he pulled out a folded piece of paper and tossed it onto the table right next to my eviction notice and David's foreclosure records. I am a tax attorney. Beatrice, he said coldly, I do not make things up, I deal in facts. Here is the final bank statement from the primary trust account. Notice the balance, read it out loud. David? David snatched the paper. His eyes scanned the document and his mouth fell open. 0. He whispered, the paper trembling in his hand. The ending balance is 0, Mom. Where did $20 million go? Marcus answered for her, because Beatrice was too busy hyperventilating to speak. It went to the casinos, David. It went to high stakes, underground poker games. It went to offshore betting syndicates and ruthless loan sharks in Macau. Your mother has a gambling addiction that makes your little Ponzi scheme look like child's play. She has been secretly bleeding this family dry for the past 7 years. Whenever she claimed she was going on a wellness retreat to Switzerland or a charity gala in Monaco, she was actually sitting at VIP tables dropping hundreds of thousands of dollars on a single hand of cards. When her personal accounts ran dry, she mortgaged her own properties. When those were gone, she figured out how to crack open the family trust. Chloe let out a sound that was half scream and half sob. No, 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 you are lying, Marcus. My mother would never do that. She hates gambling. She lectures me about buying designer shoes. She would never throw away our legacy on card games. Ask her, Marcus challenged, pointing directly at Beatrice. Ask your mother why she has been receiving threatening phone calls from private numbers at 3 in the morning. Ask her why she tried to bribe me last tax season to hide the massive liquidations from you and David. I refused to cook the books, Chloe. I filed the correct documents, and I told her she had 6 months to confess to both of you before the annual tax summaries were mailed out. Today was the deadline. I guess she ran out of time. The illusion of the mighty Sterling Empire was not just shattered, it was completely incinerated. David looked at his mother, his face twisting into a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. The realization crashed down on him with the weight of a collapsing building. He had lost his fake investment. He had lost his mistress. He had lost his career. He had lost the multi-million-dollar estate to my son. And now the one thing he thought would save him, his glorious generational safety net, was nothing but a pile of gambling markers. "You stole it!" David screamed, his voice cracking as he lunged toward Beatrice. "You stole my inheritance. You drained my future to play cards. You hypocritical monster. I am bankrupt because of you." Beatrice shrank back, covering her face completely. Chloe watched her brother screaming at their mother, the last remnants of her precious sterling legacy crumbling into dust right before her eyes. Instead of confronting the reality of her mother's gambling addiction or her brother's massive fraud, Chloe did what she had always done. She found a scapegoat. She spun around and locked her furious gaze onto her husband. Marcus stood there with his arms crossed, radiating a quiet authority that clearly infuriated her further. "You traitor!" Chloe shrieked, her voice echoing off the high ceilings of the ruined dining room. "You absolute backstabbing traitor! How could you do this to us? How could you stand there and plot with this commoner to destroy my family? You are my husband. You are supposed to protect our interests, not conspire with Valerie to humiliate my mother in her own home. Do you have any idea what you have just done?" Marcus did not flinch. His expression remained entirely impassive. "Your mother humiliated herself, Chloe," he replied smoothly. "I simply presented the tax documents. The law does not care about your fragile feelings, and neither does the Internal Revenue Service. I gave your mother 6 months to come clean, and she chose to lie. She chose to double down on her deception. You should be angry at her for stealing your future, not at me for refusing to commit a federal financial crime to cover up her offshore casino debts." But Chloe was too far gone in her desperate rage to listen to logic. She marched up to Marcus, jabbing her manicured finger aggressively into his chest. "You owed us," she spat, her face contorted with a vicious, repulsive entitlement. "My family gave you everything. We gave you status. We elevated you from your background. We let you sit at our high society table, and this is how you repay our endless generosity. You side with this gold-digging outsider and her messy, illegitimate brat. You think you are so brilliant, Marcus, but you are nothing without the sterling name attached to you. We made you acceptable to polite society. We gave you the right connections." The sheer racism and elitist toxicity of her words hung heavily in the air, poisoning the room. Even David stopped yelling at his mother long enough to look over at his sister, realizing she had just crossed a dangerous line. I watched as Marcus let out a slow, heavy sigh, as if a tremendous, invisible burden was finally being lifted from his broad shoulders. He looked down at the finger jabbing into his expensive suit and gently but firmly swatted Chloe's hand away, leaving her stunned. "Acceptable to polite society," Marcus repeated, tasting the venomous words carefully, as if examining a piece of rotten fruit. "You mean your society, Chloe? The society of bankrupt frauds who forge legal documents and steal from commercial banks. The society of shallow people who viciously slap 9-year-old children over spilled water and then blame the child. I am a senior partner at my law firm, Chloe. I earned my degrees through my own sweat and intellect. I built my career from the ground up. Your pathetic family did not give me status. You gave me a front-row seat to a spectacular display of absolute moral decay." Chloe opened her mouth to argue, but Marcus stepped closer, forcing her to retreat. "I have spent 5 long years biting my tongue while you and your mother made your little passive-aggressive comments about my background, about my culture, about how I should be eternally grateful that a sterling deigned to marry me." Marcus continued, his voice dropping to a lethal calm. "Do you think I did not hear the whispers at the country club? Do you think I did not notice when your mother hid the silver whenever my relatives came to visit? I tolerated your ignorant family because I thought you were different. I thought you actually loved me. But you are exactly like them. A hollow, cruel fraud clinging to a legacy that does not even exist anymore." Marcus reached for his left hand. His long fingers grasped the thick gold wedding band that he had worn faithfully for 5 years. With a slow, deliberate motion that carried the weight of absolute finality, he pulled the ring off his finger. The sound of the heavy gold hitting the mahogany dining table was sharp and definitive. It clinked loudly against the wood, rolling for a brief second before settling flat right next to the forged eviction notice and the zero-balance bank statements. "What are you doing?" Chloe gasped, her toxic anger suddenly replaced by a sharp, suffocating spike of pure panic. "You cannot just walk away from me. We are married, Marcus. You are my husband. You cannot leave me like this." Marcus smoothed the lapels of his suit, adjusting his cuffs with perfect composure. "I filed for divorce at 8 o'clock this morning," he stated, his voice ringing with absolute certainty throughout the silent room. "The dissolution papers will be officially served to you by tomorrow afternoon. I am entirely done with your deep-rooted racism, your endless hypocrisy, and your pathetic delusions of grandeur. I will not spend another second pretending to respect a family that operates like a cheap crime syndicate. You are entirely on your own, Chloe. Good luck paying your credit card bills without my paycheck." Marcus turned his broad back on his screaming, miserable wife, leaving her standing frozen and utterly humiliated. He walked purposefully across the dining room, leaving the toxic ruins of the Sterling family behind. He stepped firmly over the spilled cranberry sauce, avoiding the broken crystal on the floor. He stopped directly beside me, and Leo, turning to face the family he had just completely destroyed. Marcus placed a strong, protective hand on my son's shoulder, standing shoulder to shoulder with us, completing his absolute defection and sealing his fierce loyalty, completely and permanently ending their toxic marriage. Beatrice stood near the shattered remnants of her Italian silk tablecloth, her chest heaving as she stared at the three of us. She looked at Marcus, standing tall and unbothered. She looked at Leo, who was no longer crying, but watching her with wide, observant eyes. Finally, she locked her venomous gaze on me. The grand illusion of the Sterling matriarch had been stripped away, leaving nothing but a desperate, cornered animal. She had no money left. She had no house. Her son was ruined and her daughter was abandoned. She had lost every single ounce of leverage she possessed. Beatrice let out a guttural, high-pitched scream that sounded entirely inhuman. She spun around and grabbed the massive crystal vase resting on the antique credenza behind her. It was a heavy, imported piece filled with fresh white roses and cold water. Without a second of hesitation, she hurled the heavy crystal directly at my head. Marcus reacted with lightning speed. He shoved me and Leo to the side, shielding us with his broad shoulders. The heavy vase flew past my face, missing me by mere inches. It smashed violently against the expensive floral wallpaper behind us, exploding into 1,000 glittering shards. Water and crushed white petals rained down onto the hardwood floor, mingling with the broken glass. David finally snapped out of his bankruptcy-induced paralysis. "Mom, what are you doing?" he yelled, holding his hands up as if trying to calm a wild beast. "Are you trying to kill her? You're going to go to jail!" But Beatrice was far beyond the realm of logic or reason. She had entered a state of pure, calculated hysteria. She realized that if she could not win with money or power, she would win by playing the ultimate victim. If she was going to be evicted, she was going to make sure I left in the back of a police cruiser. She began to intentionally and systematically destroy the dining room. She grabbed the edges of her precious silk tablecloth and yanked it with all her might. The remaining china plates, silver-heavy wine glasses, and bowls of food went crashing to the floor in a catastrophic mess of gravy, porcelain, and glass. She picked up a heavy wooden dining chair and slammed it repeatedly against the edge of the table, splintering the expensive wood. "Mom, stop it!" Chloe shrieked, pressing herself against the far wall, terrified of her own mother's violent outburst. "You are destroying the house. It does not belong to us anymore, you stupid girl!" Beatrice snarled, her face twisted into an ugly mask of rage. She grabbed a handful of her own perfectly styled hair and yanked it hard, deliberately ruining her elegant appearance. She raked her fingernails down her own forearm, leaving deep red scratches. She was manufacturing a crime scene right in front of our eyes. "She is staging an assault." Marcus stated, his voice dangerously low as he kept his body positioned firmly between the destruction and my son. "Do not move, Valerie. Do not engage with her. Let her dig her own grave. I nodded, holding Leo close to my side. My forensic auditor mind observed every detail, capturing the exact sequence of her self-inflicted injuries. She wanted me to fight back. She wanted Marcus to restrain her. She desperately needed one of us to lay a hand on her so she could claim self-defense. We gave her absolutely nothing. We stood there like statues, watching a woman completely dismantle her own life. Finding no resistance, Beatrice pulled her mobile phone from her pocket with trembling, scratched hands. She took a deep breath, forcing her chest to heave, and dialed 3 numbers. When the call connected, her entire demeanor transformed with terrifying speed. The screaming rage vanished, replaced instantly by the weak, trembling voice of a terrified elderly woman. "Please help me!" Beatrice cried into the phone, forcing loud, desperate sobs. "Please send the police immediately. I am being attacked in my own home. I need help. They are destroying everything." The dispatcher on the other end obviously asked for her location. Beatrice rattled off the address of the estate, her voice breaking perfectly on cue. She clutched her chest, acting as if she were in physical agony, despite the fact that neither Marcus nor I had moved a single inch toward her. "Who is attacking you, Mom?" I could faintly hear the dispatcher's voice through the phone speaker. "My daughter-in-law." Beatrice wailed, squeezing her eyes shut to force out fake tears. "She went crazy. She came into my house and started smashing my beautiful things. She threw a heavy crystal vase at me. She scratched my arm. I am bleeding. Please, you have to hurry. She is completely unhinged and threatening to kill me." David stood completely frozen, watching his mother lie to emergency services. Chloe covered her mouth with her trembling hands, too shocked by the sheer audacity of the performance to intervene. Beatrice was risking felony charges for filing a false police report just to see me in handcuffs. "Are there any weapons involved, ma'am?" the dispatcher asked urgently. "Is the attacker alone?" Beatrice opened her eyes and glared at Marcus. The overt racism that Chloe had displayed earlier was clearly a family trait inherited directly from the matriarch. Beatrice saw a successful black lawyer standing in her dining room, but all she chose to weaponize in that moment was his race and his size. "No, she is not alone," Beatrice sobbed into the receiver, elevating her fake panic to a sickening new level. "She brought a man with her, a very large, aggressive man. He shoved me into the wall. I am a frail older woman and they are cornering me. Please send officers right now before this aggressive man hurts us. I fear for my life. Please dispatch the police to my home immediately before it is entirely too late for us." Beatrice ended the call, dropping her mobile phone onto the remaining patch of dry hardwood floor. She let out a ragged breath, staring at the chaotic mess she had intentionally created. Smashed china stained the walls with brown gravy. The Italian silk tablecloth lay in a crumpled heap among shattered crystal and crushed white roses. Water pooled around the legs of the expensive mahogany chairs. She had perfectly crafted a scene of violent domestic destruction. David finally moved, stepping cautiously over a broken plate. "Mom, you cannot do this," he hissed. "You are lying to the police. This is a felony. When they figure out you made this up, they will arrest you." Beatrice whipped her head toward him, her eyes flashing with manic determination. "Shut up, David," she snapped. "You are a complete failure. You lost our money and you lost this house. I am saving us. When they arrest this ungrateful woman and her massive brute of a friend, the courts will invalidate her ridiculous eviction notice. No judge will uphold a property transfer executed by a violent criminal. I am protecting our legacy because you were too weak to do it yourself." Chloe remained pressed against the far wall, her arms wrapped tightly around her stomach. She looked terrified, caught between her mother's psychotic strategy and the undeniable reality that Marcus, a senior partner at a prestigious law firm, was standing right there witnessing everything. Marcus did not flinch. He kept his broad shoulders squared, standing like an impenetrable fortress in front of my son and me. He leaned his head down slightly, speaking in a low, calm voice that only I could hear. "The police will come in hot, Valerie. They received a call about an aggressive black man attacking an elderly white woman in an affluent neighborhood. Keep your hands visible. Do not make any sudden movements. Let her perform. We hold the winning hand. I nodded, keeping Leo tucked safely against my hip. I felt his small hands gripping the fabric of my dress. My son was watching the adults in the room learning a masterclass in how desperate people behave when their lies catch up to them. The distant wail of sirens cut through the silence of the upscale neighborhood, growing louder and more frantic with every passing second. Beatrice heard it too. A chilling smile stretched across her face for a fraction of a second before she rapidly shifted back into character. She intentionally threw herself down onto the wet hardwood floor, landing hard on her knees amid the broken glass and spilled water. She let out a sharp cry, deliberately dragging her forearm across a jagged piece of crystal to draw a fresh line of blood. She smeared a mixture of water and dirt across her cheeks, making herself look utterly pathetic and thoroughly victimized. The sirens grew deafeningly loud outside the front windows. Flashing red and blue lights swept across the walls of the ruined dining room. Tires screeched in the driveway, followed by the heavy slamming of car doors. Heavy boots pounded up the front porch steps. Police opened the door, a loud voice commanded from the entryway. "We are coming in." David stood paralyzed, unable to bring himself to unlock the door. The heavy oak front door was forced open with a loud crash. 3 police officers burst into the foyer, their hands resting firmly on their duty belts, their eyes scanning the environment for immediate threats. They moved quickly and tactically, following the sound of Beatrice's manufactured sobbing straight into the dining room. The lead officer, a tall man with a stern expression, took one look at the devastated room and immediately zeroed in on Marcus. The radio chatter on his shoulder echoed loudly. "Step away from the woman," the officer barked, pointing directly at Marcus. "Put your hands where I can see them right now." Marcus remained perfectly calm. He slowly raised his hands, showing his empty palms, and took 2 deliberate steps away from Beatrice, ensuring he made no sudden or aggressive movements. "I am cooperating," Officer Marcus stated, his voice even and respectful. "I am unarmed, and I am stepping back." The second officer rushed to Beatrice's side, kneeling in the puddle of water and crushed roses. Beatrice launched into the performance of a lifetime. She threw her arms around the officer's neck, sobbing hysterically, and pointing a trembling, bloody finger at Marcus and me. "They attacked me," Beatrice wailed, her voice cracking with fake terror. "Thank God you got here. My daughter-in-law went completely insane. She brought this aggressive man into my home, and they started destroying everything. They threw a crystal vase at my head. They pushed me to the ground. Look at my arm. Look at what they did to my house. I begged them to stop, but they said they were going to kill me and throw me out on the street. Please arrest them. Get them out of my house before they hurt my son and my daughter." The lead officer glared at me and Marcus. He stepped forward, his hand still resting cautiously on his belt. "Ma'am," he said, addressing me with a harsh, authoritative tone. "Is this true? Did you and this man assault this homeowner and destroy this property?" David and Chloe stood in total silence. Neither of them possessed the basic human decency or the courage to speak up and stop their mother from filing a false police report. They were perfectly willing to watch Marcus and me get dragged away in handcuffs if it meant saving their own miserable skins. I looked at the officer. I looked at Beatrice weeping on the floor. I did not scream. I did not argue. I did not frantically try to explain my innocence or beg the police to believe me. Instead, I slowly and calmly reached over to the heavily damaged wooden credenza. I confidently picked up the television remote to reveal the ultimate truth. I did not say a word to the police officers who were glaring at Marcus and me. Instead, I calmly reached for the sleek black remote control resting on the edge of the ruined credenza. The large flat-screen television mounted above the fireplace had been off-blending seamlessly into the background. With a single click, the screen flared to life, illuminating the chaotic dining room with its bright glow. The officers instantly shifted their attention to the television. I tapped a few buttons, navigating to an application hidden deep within the smart TV's menu. It was a direct feed to the discreet high-definition security cameras I had installed weeks ago, anticipating that Beatrice might try something desperate when cornered. The cameras were strategically placed to monitor the main living areas, capturing both video and crystal clear audio. I selected the file time-stamped for the past hour and pressed play. The video began playing in sharp, undeniable high-definition, broadcasting the events of the evening for everyone in the room to witness. The volume was loud enough to cut through the tension, the voices of the Sterling family echoing back at them. The video started right before dinner. The officers watched as my 9-year-old son Leo accidentally knocked over his water glass. They heard his immediate panicked apologies. And then they saw it, the brutal, unmistakable slap. Beatrice's hand striking Leo across the face with enough force to send him crashing to the floor. The sound of the slap, amplified through the television speakers, was sickening. The lead officer's jaw tightened. The second officer, who was still kneeling next to Beatrice, slowly stood up, stepping away from the woman who had just claimed to be a frail, terrified victim. Beatrice's fake sobs choked off in her throat. She stared at the screen, her eyes wide with mounting terror as her own actions were played back to her. The video continued, mercilessly exposing every toxic word. The officers heard Chloe's vile, racist rant about Leo being a stray dog and not sharing their purebred bloodline. They heard Beatrice shrieking for Leo to get out of her sight. They saw Marcus step in, interposing his body between Beatrice and Leo, his voice calm but firm, as he warned her never to touch the boy again. They saw David sitting completely passively scrolling through his phone, while his mother assaulted his stepson. The footage rolled on, capturing the revelation of the eviction notice, the exposure of David's massive debts, and his mistress and Marcus dismantling Chloe's threats about the empty trust fund. The police watched as the Sterling family's facade was stripped away piece by piece. And then came the climax of Beatrice's performance. The officers watched intently as the video showed Beatrice screaming, grabbing the heavy crystal vase and hurling it directly at my head. They saw Marcus shove me and Leo out of the way, the vase shattering against the wall. They watched Beatrice intentionally drag the silk tablecloth, pulling the china and glasses to the floor in a calculated frenzy of destruction. They saw her smash the heavy wooden chair against the table. They watched her deliberately rake her fingernails down her own arm, drawing blood, manufacturing the injuries she had just shown them. The final scene on the video was Beatrice throwing herself to the wet floor, faking tears, and dialing 911 to report a fabricated assault. The audio of her panicked, lying voice pleading for help echoed through the room, perfectly matching the call the dispatcher had received. I pressed pause, freezing the image on Beatrice's face contorted in an ugly mask of rage just before she made the call. The silence in the dining room was absolute, far heavier than before. The evidence was irrefutable. Every lie, every manipulation, every act of violence had been captured and broadcast for the authorities. The lead officer turned slowly from the television to look at Beatrice, who was still sitting on the floor amid the ruined roses and broken glass. Her face was ashen, her eyes darting frantically between the officers, searching for a way out that simply did not exist. The performance was over. The curtain had fallen. "Ma'am," the lead officer said, his voice cold and devoid of the previous concern he had shown her. "Are you aware that filing a false police report is a serious offense?" Beatrice opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked at David desperately, silently pleading for him to intervene to save her. But David was staring at the floor, his entire body trembling fully, realizing the catastrophic magnitude of the situation. Chloe had shrunk back against the wall, trying to make herself invisible, terrified that the police might scrutinize her racist comments next. The second officer pulled a notebook from his pocket, his demeanor shifting entirely. He looked at me, then down at Leo, who was still holding on to my dress. The officer's expression was a mix of professional detachment and quiet sympathy. "Ma'am," the second officer said, addressing me directly, "we have clear video evidence of assault against a minor, attempted assault against you with a deadly weapon, that vase, and the intentional destruction of property, not to mention the false report." He paused, looking back at Beatrice, whose breathing was becoming shallow and rapid. "Would you like to press charges against her?" He asked the question, hanging heavily in the air, shifting the entire dynamic of power in the room. The decision was now entirely mine. I looked from the police officer down to Beatrice, still kneeling in the puddle of crushed roses. Her eyes were wide with a pathetic, desperate terror. She held her breath, waiting for me to dictate her immediate future. If I said yes, she would be handcuffed and hauled to a squad car. A part of me wanted that. A part of me truly wanted to see cold metal click around her wrists as permanent payback for the angry red mark still fading on my innocent son's cheek. But my forensic auditor brain saw the strategic flaw in that immediate gratification. If Beatrice was arrested tonight, she would be processed into a warm holding cell and given a public defender. She would spin a narrative of a family dispute blown out of proportion. More importantly, it would delay the primary objective. I did not want her temporarily removed. I wanted the toxic Sterling family permanently excised from my property forever. I am not going to press criminal assault charges tonight, I said, keeping my voice level despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Beatrice let out a massive dramatic gasp of relief, slumping forward onto the wet floor. Chloe let out a shaky breath, pressing her hand against her chest. Even David seemed to relax slightly, his tense shoulders dropping as he mistakenly believed the absolute worst of the storm had finally passed. However, I continued, ensuring my voice carried absolute authority. I am exercising my legal right as the representative of the property owner to have them removed for trespassing. They lack my permission to be inside this house. The second officer frowned slightly, looking confused. Mom, you are married to this man, are you not? This is a marital home. Evicting a spouse requires a formal civil process. You cannot just kick them out without a proper court order. I already have the legal court order, I replied, turning back to the dining table. I picked up the official eviction notice, holding it out to the lead officer. He took the document, his eyes scanning the red stamps, the judicial signature, and the specific names listed under the strict mandate to vacate. As I explained earlier, this is not a marital home, I told the officers. My husband secretly mortgaged this property without my knowledge to fund his gambling debts and his mistress. He subsequently defaulted on that loan. The bank foreclosed and sold the debt. The legal owner of this estate is a private trust fund strictly in the name of my 9-year-old son Leo. David and Beatrice Sterling are holdover tenants. They ignored the legal 30-day notice to quit. I deliberately checked my watch, holding my wrist up so the officers could clearly see the time. The court order explicitly states they must vacate the premises by 5 o'clock this evening, I announced. It is now 5:20. They are officially trespassing on my son's property. I want them removed immediately. The lead officer pulled his radio from his shoulder, calling in the docket number on the eviction notice. We waited in agonizing silence while the dispatcher verified the document's authenticity. The radio crackled back to life, confirming that the order was active, valid, and ready for immediate enforcement. The officer handed the document back to me and turned his attention to David. The shift in his demeanor was absolute. He was no longer dealing with a wealthy homeowner reporting a domestic disturbance. He was dealing with a squatter caught trying to frame an innocent woman. You heard the lady, the lead officer said, his voice hard and uncompromising. The eviction order is valid. You and your mother no longer have any legal right to be on these premises. You need to gather your personal belongings and vacate the property right now. David stared at the officer, his mouth opening and closing in sheer disbelief. Officer, you cannot do this. David pleaded, his voice rising in panic. It is Thanksgiving. It is freezing outside. We have nowhere to go. My mother is elderly. You cannot just throw us out into the street. The second officer stepped forward. Sir, you had 30 days to make arrangements. You chose to ignore a lawful court order and then stood by while your mother filed a false police report. You have exactly 10 minutes to grab whatever essential clothing you can carry in a couple bags. If you are not out of this house by the time those 10 minutes are up, you will be arrested for trespassing. The reality of the situation crashed down on the Sterling family like an avalanche. The illusion of their power, their wealth, and their untouchable status had been entirely decimated. They were not leaving this house in luxury. They were being thrown out by armed police officers with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Chloe began to sob. She looked at Marcus, who simply turned his head away, refusing to offer her sympathy. Beatrice remained on the floor, staring blankly at the ruined Italian silk tablecloth, her mind completely broken by the spectacular failure of her own malicious scheme. But it was David who shattered. The golden boy, who had spent the last 5 years treating me like an inferior subordinate, suddenly realized the magnitude of his ruin. He had no offshore accounts. He had no secret trust fund. He had no house, no career, and no future. He was about to be shoved out into the freezing Chicago November night, with nothing. David let out a broken, wretched sob. His legs gave out beneath him, and he dropped heavily to his knees, right in the middle of the dining room floor. He looked up at me, his eyes swimming with desperate, helpless tears. "Valerie, please," he begged, his voice cracking as he reached forward. "Please do not do this to me. I have absolutely nothing left in this world. We are still a family. You are carrying my child." The officers shifted their weight, exchanging an uncomfortable glance. The mention of an unborn child temporarily paused their tactical momentum. David noticed this brief hesitation and immediately seized the opportunity. He shuffled forward on his knees, dragging his expensive slacks through the puddles of water and crushed roses. He reached out with trembling hands, desperately trying to grasp the hem of my dress. I took a deliberate step backward, keeping my physical distance from the man who had spent half a decade treating my existence as an inconvenient afterthought. "Valerie, please, you have to listen to me," David pleaded, his voice echoing off the ruined walls of the dining room. "I know I made mistakes. I know I messed up with the money and the mortgage. But everything I did because I was under so much pressure. You have no idea the crushing weight of maintaining the sterling family image. My mother demanded perfection. The partners at my firm demanded perfection. I was just trying to keep us afloat. I was trying to give you and Leo the magnificent life I promised you on our wedding day." I stared down at him, feeling absolutely nothing. The man kneeling before me was not a husband seeking redemption. He was a cornered parasite trying to latch onto a new host. "5 years, Valerie," David cried, clapping his hands together in a posture of desperate prayer. "We have been married for 5 long years. You cannot just throw all of that away over a financial dispute. We took vows to stand by each other for richer or for poorer. I am poorer right now, but I can rebuild. I am a smart man. I can get a regular job. I will cut off all contact with Ashley. I will never step foot in a casino or a private investment meeting again. I will do whatever you want me to do. Just please call off these officers. Give me 1 week to figure things out. Give my mother a few days to pack her belongings with some dignity." Beatrice, who was still slumped against the wall, suddenly nodded vigorously. "Yes, Valerie," Beatrice whimpered, wiping her stained cheeks. "He is your husband. He loves you. We are your family. You cannot put a pregnant woman through this kind of extreme stress." The sheer audacity of their sudden affection made my blood run cold. 30 minutes ago, Beatrice had called me a gold digger and David had ordered me out of his house. Now they were weeping on the floor, pretending we shared a sacred bond. David saw my cold expression and intensified his performance. He crawled another inch forward, turning his tear-streaked face upward. "Think about Leo," he begged, trying to weaponize my 9-year-old son against me. "Leo needs a father figure. I have provided a roof over his head for 5 years. I paid for his clothes and his private school. If you throw me out into the snow tonight, you are ripping a father away from a boy who already lost his biological dad. Do you really want to inflict that kind of psychological trauma on your own son just to prove a point?" Marcus shifted his stance heavily, clearly disgusted by David's tactic. But he kept his promise to let me handle my own battles. I felt Leo's small hand tighten around my fingers. My son was not traumatized by David leaving. My son was traumatized by a grandmother who slapped him and a stepfather who watched it happen without saying a single word of protest. When using Leo failed to elicit any sympathy from me, David deployed his ultimate weapon, the trump card he believed made him entirely untouchable. He lowered his voice, injecting it with a sickeningly sweet tone of manufactured devotion. He pointed a shaking finger toward my midsection. "If you will not do it for me, and if you will not do it for Leo, then you have to do it for the baby." David pleaded, tears spilling over his eyelashes. You are carrying my child, Valerie. Our baby is growing inside you right now. You are 4 months pregnant with the next generation of our family. You cannot put my child through the stress of homelessness. You cannot sentence my unborn baby to grow up in a broken home without a father. He let out a ragged, desperate sigh, lowering his head until his forehead nearly touched the wet hardwood floor. Please, Valerie, he whispered, his voice breaking perfectly. I am begging you on my hands and knees. Spare me for the sake of the innocent life you are carrying. Give me a chance to be the father this new baby deserves. Give me a chance to make things right for our growing family. Do not let my child be born into a world where its father is living on the streets. The lead officer cleared his throat, looking at me with a hint of expectation. It was a masterful performance, to any outside observer. David looked like a broken, repentant man fighting desperately to save his pregnant wife and his unborn child from a tragic situation. He had played the sympathy card flawlessly. I stood perfectly still, letting his pathetic words echo in the quiet room. I slowly looked down at my stomach, observing the slight rounding of my figure beneath the fabric of my dress. I placed my free hand over my abdomen, resting my palm against the curve. A slow, chilling smile spread across my face, the kind of smile that makes the temperature in the room drop by 10 degrees. I looked back down at the man sobbing at my feet. I watched his chest heaving with fake anxiety, waiting for my answer. I let him hold on to that tiny shred of false hope for just a moment longer before delivering the final devastating blow. David said coldly, "Why do you think this baby is actually yours?" David's desperate plea hung in the cold air of the dining room. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and pleading, waiting for the mention of an unborn child to miraculously erase years of financial ruin and emotional abuse. I kept my hand resting gently on my stomach, letting him cling to that pathetic manufactured lifeline for just a few seconds longer. The police officers exchanged uncertain glances, clearly uncomfortable with the sudden introduction of a pregnant woman into an eviction scenario. I looked down at the man kneeling in the puddles of water and crushed roses. My smile was razor thin and utterly devoid of warmth. "David," I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel, "why do you think this baby is actually yours?" The reaction was instantaneous and explosive. Beatrice, who had been whimpering against the wall, suddenly found her voice. She lurched forward, her face twisting into a mask of pure, self-righteous fury. "You cheating tramp!" Beatrice shrieked, pointing a shaking, blood-smeared finger at me. "I knew it. I always knew you were nothing but a common streetwalker trying to trap my son. You bring your illegitimate brat into my home, you forge legal documents to steal our property, and now you admit you're carrying some other man's bastard child. You are completely unhinged." She turned to the police officers, her voice shrill with manufactured outrage. "Did you hear her? She just admitted she's a cheating gold digger. Arrest her! Arrest this insane woman right now." David remained on his knees, his expression shifting from desperate pleading to sheer, unadulterated shock. He stared at my stomach, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled to process the revelation. "Valerie," he stammered, his voice cracking. "What are you saying?" "We've been trying for a baby. We went to the fertility clinic. You showed me the positive test." "I showed you a piece of plastic I bought online, David," I replied smoothly, my tone entirely conversational. "I needed to see how far you and your mother would go. I needed to see if the promise of a sterling heir would magically erase the fact that you secretly mortgaged our home to pay for your mistress." I unzipped the front pocket of my tote bag and pulled out a slim blue folder. I tossed it onto the table right next to the eviction notice and the zero-balance bank statements. The folder slid across the smooth mahogany, coming to a stop near David's trembling hands. "Open it," I commanded. David scrambled to his feet, his hands shaking so violently he could barely grasp the cardboard flap. He flipped the folder open, revealing a stack of official medical documents stamped with the logo of the high-end fertility clinic we had supposedly been visiting together. "Those are your medical records, David," I explained, ensuring my voice was loud enough for Chloe and Beatrice to hear every single word. "I am a forensic auditor. I don't just track money. I track facts. When I noticed the massive financial discrepancies in our accounts, I decided to investigate every aspect of our life together. I requested a full independent review of the fertility clinic's findings. David's eyes darted across the medical jargon, his face draining of whatever color it had left. You see, David, I continued pacing slowly around the ruined table. You spent your 20s living a very reckless, very expensive lifestyle. All those luxury wellness retreats your mother funded, the excessive partying, the unregulated performance enhancers you bought to keep up appearances at the firm, they had a rather permanent physiological cost. I stopped right in front of him, locking eyes with the man who had thought he could effortlessly manipulate me. You are 100% sterile, David. I stated, my voice echoing in the quiet room. You have been completely sterile for over 7 years. The clinic confirmed it. There is absolutely zero chance of you ever fathering a child naturally. The doctors told you this years ago, but you were too arrogant to admit it. You let me believe we were struggling with fertility because of me. Beatrice let out a strangled gasp, clutching her chest as if she had been physically struck. Chloe shrank further against the wall, her eyes darting between her brother and the medical documents. You lied to me, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You let me endure years of invasive testing, painful hormone injections, and the devastating heartbreak of negative results, all while knowing it was biologically impossible for you to give me a child. You let your mother belittle me for failing to provide an heir, knowing the entire time that the failure was entirely yours. David dropped the folder, the medical records scattering across the floor, mixing with the broken glass and spilled wine. He backed away from me, his breathing shallow and rapid, unable to deny the undeniable proof of his own profound deception. So no, David, I concluded, brushing a non-existent piece of lint from my dress. I am not pregnant. There is no baby. There is no innocent life to spare. I manufactured the pregnancy solely to ensure you and your mother would drop your guard long enough for me to finalize the purchase of this estate's defaulted debt. I needed you complacent, and nothing makes a sterling man more complacent than the illusion of his own virility. Beatrice erupted into a terrifying, hysterical fit. She grabbed the edge of the dining table, her knuckles white, her face a terrifying mask of aristocratic fury. You psychotic, manipulative monster! Beatrice screamed, her voice reaching a pitch that made the police officers wince. You orchestrated this entire elaborate lie just to humiliate us. You think you can destroy the Sterling legacy with your fake pregnancy and your stolen house. We are Sterlings. We have a pure royal bloodline that stretches back generations. We built this city. You are nothing but a delusional, vindictive commoner, trying to taint our superior lineage with your insanity. She beat her fists against the ruined mahogany table, completely unhinged, her fake injuries forgotten in her blinding rage. Our blood is pure. Our legacy is untouchable. You will never, ever destroy the Sterling name. As Beatrice stood there hyperventilating and screaming about her pure royal bloodline, the deep resonant sound of someone clearing their throat cut through the hysteria. Marcus, who had been standing silently beside me, and Leo slowly uncrossed his arms. He adjusted his suit jacket, his expression completely devoid of the polite restraint he had practiced for the past 5 years. He looked at Beatrice with an expression of profound, almost clinical pity. Marcus stood like a mountain of calm in the center of the chaotic dining room. He adjusted the cuffs of his tailored suit, his movements slow and deliberate, contrasting sharply with the frantic energy radiating from Beatrice. He looked at the matriarch of the Sterling family with an expression that was difficult to read, a mixture of disgust, pity, and a profound, chilling finality. Beatrice stopped screaming, her chest heaving as she registered the change in Marcus's demeanor. She wiped a smudge of dirt and water from her cheek, trying to regain some semblance of her shattered aristocratic dignity. What? She snapped, her voice trembling. What is it, Marcus? Are you finally going to say something, or are you just going to stand there and watch this woman destroy us? Marcus didn't answer her immediately. Instead, he reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and slowly pulled out a pristine white envelope. It was sealed with a tamper-evident sticker from a prominent nationally recognized genetics laboratory. I have listened to you talk about your pure bloodline for 5 years, Beatrice. Marcus began, his deep voice carrying effortlessly across the room. I have sat at this table and endured your thinly veiled insults. I have watched you look down your nose at everyone who doesn't possess the sacred Sterling name. I have watched you excuse your son's failures and your daughter's cruelty because, according to you, your lineage makes you inherently superior. Beatrice's eyes darted to the envelope in his hand. A flicker of something that looked dangerously close to terror crossed her face. What is that? She demanded, her voice losing its shrill edge and dropping to a nervous whisper. What are you holding? Marcus held the envelope up so the police officers David and Chloe could clearly see the laboratory's logo. As you all know, I handle the tax filings for the entire Sterling estate, Marcus explained, turning his attention to David and Chloe. That includes managing the medical trust set up by your late father, Richard Sterling. A few months ago, while finalizing the annual reports, I noticed a rather glaring discrepancy in the medical histories required for the insurance underwriters. David frowned, still kneeling on the floor, his brain struggling to switch gears from his own exposed lies to whatever Marcus was about to reveal. What discrepancy? David asked, his voice weak. Dad died of a heart attack. His medical history was an open book. Richard Sterling's medical history was indeed an open book, Marcus agreed, taking a step toward David, which is exactly why the anomaly was so easy to spot. Your father, Richard, had a very specific, very rare blood type, O negative. Beatrice let out a sharp, involuntary gasp. She clutched her chest again, but this time there was no theatrical performance. It was a visceral, genuine reaction of pure panic. She took a step backward, nearly tripping over the broken leg of a dining chair. Marcus didn't take his eyes off David. You, David, recently provided a comprehensive blood panel to your life insurance provider, a policy. I helped you set up, remember? David nodded slowly. Confusion etched deeply into his features. Yes. What does that have to do with anything? Your blood type is AB negative positive. Marcus stated, the words dropping like lead weights onto the ruined Italian silk. Now, I am not a geneticist, David. I am a tax lawyer, but I do know basic high school biology. It is genetically impossible for a man with O negative blood and a woman with A positive blood, which is your mother's type, to produce a child with an AB positive blood type. The silence in the room was deafening. Even the police officers seemed to stop breathing, captivated by the unfolding drama. Chloe's mouth fell open, her eyes darting between Marcus and her mother. David stared at Marcus, his mind desperately trying to reject the information it was receiving. That's... David started, his voice barely a whisper. That's a mistake. The lab must have mixed up the results. That happens all the time. That is exactly what I thought, Marcus replied smoothly. I assumed it was a clerical error, but given my fiduciary duty to the Sterling estate, I couldn't ignore it, so I dug a little deeper. I requested copies of your original birth records, David. I cross-referenced them with Richard Sterling's military medical files. Beatrice suddenly lunged forward, her hands outstretched, trying to snatch the envelope from Marcus. Give me that! She screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. You have no right. That is private medical information. You stole that. Marcus easily sidestepped her frantic grab, holding the envelope out of her reach. He looked down at her, his expression hardening into pure ice. I didn't steal anything, Beatrice. As the executor of the medical trust, I had full legal authorization to access those files, and what I found was deeply concerning. He turned back to David, who was still kneeling, frozen in a state of absolute shock. I needed to be absolutely certain, David. So I took the liberty of obtaining a DNA sample from you during our last golf outing. Just a simple swab from a water bottle you discarded. I sent it to an independent facility along with a DNA sample we still have on file from your late father. Marcus broke the tamper evidence seal on the envelope with a sharp tearing sound. He pulled out a single sheet of paper, the official laboratory results printed clearly in bold black ink. The results came back yesterday. Marcus announced, his voice ringing with absolute finality. He held the paper out not to Beatrice, but directly to David. The probability of paternity is 0%. Richard Sterling was not your biological father, David. You do not share a single drop of Sterling blood. David stared at the piece of paper in Marcus's outstretched hand. He reached for it with fingers that shook so violently the paper rattled like dry leaves in the wind. He read the bold black text over and over, his lips moving silently as he formed the words erasing his identity. Exactly 0%. The printed numbers were absolute. There was no margin for error, no loophole to exploit, no legal maneuver that could change his genetic makeup. The man he had emulated his entire life, the great titan of industry whose legacy he wore, was not his real father. David slowly raised his head and locked his devastated, bloodshot eyes on his mother. Beatrice had pressed her back against the ruined wallpaper, looking like a trapped rat. All her haughty, aristocratic bravado had vanished entirely, replaced by the pathetic, sweating panic of a liar caught in the blinding spotlight. For 35 long years, she had paraded around high society, acting as the moral compass of the city. She had looked down on anyone she deemed beneath her station, destroying careers and reputations with a single snide remark. She had literally called me a cheating tramp just moments ago. "You projected your own dirty sins onto Valerie Marcus," said his voice laced with heavy disgust. "You called her a gold digger and a cheat, because that is exactly what you are, Beatrice. You married Richard Sterling for his money and status. You carried another man's child into his home and passed that boy off as the rightful heir to the empire. You lied to your husband every single day of your marriage. You let him love and raise a child that was not his, and used that child to secure your financial future. You are the ultimate pathetic fraud." Chloe let out a sharp, hysterical laugh that cracked in the middle. She pushed herself off the wall, staring at her mother, as if looking at a total stranger. "Are you kidding me right now?" Chloe shrieked, her voice echoing across the room. "My whole life you lectured me about dating the right people. You made me break up with my high school boyfriend because his family owned a hardware store instead of a hedge fund. You told me I must preserve the Sterling pedigree at all costs. And you slept with some random guy. Who is his real father?" Beatrice covered her face with her scratched hands, sobbing uncontrollably. The tears were genuine now, fueled by the terrifying destruction of her lifelong facade. "It was a mistake," Beatrice wailed through her trembling fingers. "We were having terrible marital problems. Richard was always working. He was never home. I was lonely, and I made a terrible mistake. But I was a good wife. I slowly built this family. I protected our image from the press. I did everything for the Sterling name. I sacrificed my own happiness to keep this family together at the absolute top of the social ladder." "Protected our image," David repeated, his voice dangerously low. He crumpled the DNA results in his fist, using the table to pull himself up from his knees. He staggered toward his mother, his face twisted into a mask of pure betrayal. "You protected yourself. You made me believe I had to live up to the legendary Richard Sterling. You pushed me into banking. You forced me to take over the firm because I was the firstborn son. I ruined my own life trying to fill the shoes of a man who was not my father. You made me a lie." I watched the glorious implosion from my position next to Leo. The pure irony was almost too sweet to bear. Beatrice had spent years treating me like dirt on her shoe, insisting I was unfit to sit at her dining table because of my middle-class background. She had demanded perfection and absolute loyalty from a husband she had profoundly betrayed. Her entire existence was a meticulously constructed house of cards, and Marcus had just pulled out the bottom row, causing the whole thing to crash down in a spectacular display of well-deserved karmic retribution right before my eyes. The police officers stood by the door, remaining silent but highly vigilant. They had arrived expecting to arrest a violent home invader, only to find themselves front-row spectators to the spectacular collapse of a wealthy dynasty. The lead officer adjusted his stance clearly, realizing that the domestic disturbance was merely a symptom of a much larger systemic fraud. Beatrice was obviously not a victim. She was the sole architect of her own ruin. Her frantic emergency call was merely just another pathetic manipulation tactic designed to preserve the last shreds of a fake legacy she had stolen decades ago. As David continued to glare at his weeping mother, a sudden chilling realization seemed to wash over his features. The personal anger in his eyes was abruptly eclipsed by a new, far more profound terror. He looked down at his trembling hands, then over to Marcus, his breath catching sharply in his throat. The personal betrayal from his mother was devastating on an emotional level, but the legal implications of his parentage were completely catastrophic. David was a high-level finance executive. He knew the intricate legal bylaws of the Sterling Family Corporation better than anyone else in the room. Marcus finally saw the horrifying realization hit David like a freight train. The tax lawyer nodded slowly, recognizing the exact moment David's brain processed the fatal legal trap he was currently standing in. "You just figured it out, did you not?" David, Marcus asked quietly, watching the color drain completely from his former brother-in-law's face. "You just remembered the succession clause in Richard's original corporate charter, the one very specifically detailing corporate ownership. The strict unyielding clause specifying that voting shares and executive control can only be legally held by direct biological descendants of the pure Sterling bloodline." David stared at Marcus, his eyes widening in sheer terror. His legs gave out completely, sending him sprawling onto the wet, ruined hardwood floor. He grabbed his hair, muttering the word "no" repeatedly. The succession clause. Richard Sterling had been obsessed with preserving his legacy. He had his corporate lawyers draft a highly specific charter, ensuring that the Sterling empire would never fall into the hands of outside investors or ambitious stepchildren. The foundational document mandated that all controlling shares and executive board positions must transfer exclusively to direct biological descendants of the Sterling bloodline. I stepped forward, crossing my arms as I looked down at my soon-to-be ex-husband. "You committed massive corporate fraud, David," I said, my voice ringing with clinical precision. "When Richard died 5 years ago, you signed the succession documents under strict penalty of perjury. You swore you were the biological heir. You claimed the majority voting rights. You eagerly took the prestigious title of Chief Executive Officer. And you have been aggressively collecting massive quarterly dividends that you were entirely ineligible to receive. You essentially stole tens of millions of dollars from the actual legitimate shareholders." Beatrice let out a weak moan, but I immediately turned my sharp attention to her. "And you, Beatrice," I continued, feeling a profound sense of justice delivering this devastating blow. "You orchestrated the entire deception from the very beginning. You signed the official probate documents swearing David was Richard's biological son to ensure he gained absolute control of the lucrative company instead of it passing to the remaining board members or even your daughter Chloe. You committed grand larceny on an unprecedented corporate scale just to feed your miserable gambling addiction at offshore casinos." Chloe suddenly bolted upright, pushing herself violently away from the wall. Her tear-stained face twisted into a new, horrified realization. "Wait a minute," Chloe shouted, pointing an accusing, trembling finger directly at David. "If David is not the biological son, then the controlling shares were supposed to bypass him entirely. They were supposed to go directly to me. You stole my company, David. You and Mother conspired to deliberately rob me of my rightful inheritance so the golden boy could pretend to be a titan of industry while treating me like garbage." Beatrice reached out desperately toward her furious daughter. "Chloe, please, you do not understand anything about business," Beatrice begged, her voice cracking with sheer panic. "We had to relentlessly protect the public image. Women are not fully respected in that aggressive commercial real estate sector. I did what I absolutely had to do for the Sterling reputation to keep the powerful board members happy." Chloe aggressively slapped her mother's outstretched hand away, letting out a shrill, screaming fit of pure, unadulterated frustration. "You stole my entire life!" Chloe shrieked, retreating rapidly to the opposite side of the ruined dining room, sobbing uncontrollably. David looked up at me, his chest heaving with severe, debilitating panic. "Valerie, you cannot tell anyone about this," he pleaded, his voice cracking into a high-pitched, pathetic whine. "If the board of directors finds out, they will absolutely strip me of everything I possess. They will ruthlessly claw back every single dividend I have ever spent. They will send me to a brutal federal prison facility for decades. Please, You have to keep this completely quiet, Valerie. I will give you whatever you possibly want right now. I will sign the divorce papers today. I will walk away from this house without a single fight. Just please do not release that DNA test to the corporate board. I tilted my head, feigning a brief moment of sympathy, before crushing his spirit entirely. You are a little late for bargaining, David, I replied smoothly, holding his terrified gaze. Do you honestly think I would wait until Thanksgiving dinner to file my formal audit reports? I am a licensed forensic auditor. My professional obligation requires me to report massive corporate fraud the exact second I verify the evidence. I sent the complete financial dossier, including your massive off-the-books debt, your illegal mortgage on this property, and the certified DNA results directly to the corporate legal counsel yesterday morning. David let out a strangled, horrific gasp, clutching his throat as if he could no longer breathe the oxygen in the room. The board of directors held an emergency executive session at exactly noon today. I continued delivering the final definitive nails into his professional coffin. They voted unanimously to terminate your position as chief executive officer, effective immediately. They also initiated an immediate aggressive clawback protocol for every single dollar you illegally acquired over the last 5 long years. You do not just owe the commercial bank for this foreclosed house, David. You actively owe the Sterling Corporation tens of millions of dollars in stolen dividends and fraudulent executive compensation. You are going to boldly face federal prosecution, I stated plainly, stepping back to stand securely beside Marcus and Leo. The Securities and Exchange Commission takes a very dim view of chief executives who maliciously forge their parentage to unlawfully obtain majority shareholder status. You aggressively lied on your tax forms. You lied on essential corporate charters. You lied on federal banking documents when you used those fraudulent shares as heavy collateral for your terrible secret investments. The fragile house of cards is not just falling down, David. It is actively burning to the ground right around you. The police officers standing in the room exchanged incredibly serious glances. They knew this was now far beyond their local neighborhood jurisdiction. David curled into a tight fetal position on the soaking wet floor, sobbing loudly and uncontrollably. His vast fortune was definitively proven to be a massive criminal illusion. Suddenly, a loud, sharp, authoritative knock echoed fiercely through the quiet, tense house. Corporate lawyers, closely accompanied by strict federal investigators, had officially arrived to serve the harsh injunctions and completely freeze all of David's remaining financial assets. The heavy oak front door swung open, revealing stern-faced individuals wearing dark suits. 3 federal investigators, badged and uncompromising, stepped into the foyer, accompanied by 2 senior corporate litigators from the Sterling Company. The lead investigator walked directly toward David, curled on the wet floor. She looked down at him with absolute professional detachment, handing him a thick stack of legal documents. David Sterling, she announced, you are officially served with an immediate asset freeze injunction. All of your personal and corporate accounts, properties, offshore holdings, and safety deposit boxes are completely locked down, pending a massive criminal investigation into corporate fraud. David did not reach up to take the papers. They fluttered down, landing on his wet knees. The local police officers stepped forward to coordinate with the federal agents. The lead local officer pointed toward the door. The federal freeze accelerates this local eviction order, the officer stated firmly. You cannot take any valuable assets from this property. You are allowed to take your basic personal clothing and essential medications. That is absolutely it. One of the local officers walked out to his cruiser and returned a moment later with a roll of heavy-duty industrial black garbage bags. He tossed the roll onto the dry end of the dining table, making Beatrice flinch. You have exactly 10 minutes, the officer commanded, pointing at the sobbing family. Grab a bag, fill it with your personal clothes, pack jewelry, electronics, or artwork, and you will be arrested immediately. Move. The sheer visual poetry of that moment was something I will remember forever. Beatrice, the woman who had spent decades ruthlessly judging people for wearing last season's designer collections, was forced to scramble on her hands and knees. She grabbed a cheap black plastic garbage bag and stumbled toward the grand staircase, weeping hysterically. Chloe followed her, clutching her own trash bag like a lifeline. David had to be physically hauled to his feet and shoved toward the stairs. I turned my back on their pathetic, chaotic scramble. I looked at Leo standing safely behind Marcus, taking in the unbelievable scene. I smiled warmly at my son, letting the coldness melt away completely. "Are you hungry, sweetheart?" I asked, my voice soft and reassuring. Leo nodded slowly, his gaze shifting from the stairs back to me. "Yes, Mom," he whispered. I walked over to the far end of the dining table, which had miraculously survived Beatrice's violent, destructive tantrum. A golden roasted turkey sat untouched on a large silver platter. I picked up the carving knife, moving with deliberate, calm grace. The house echoed with the frantic sounds of drawers being slammed upstairs and local police officers loudly shouting at them to hurry up. I ignored all of it. I sliced a perfect piece of turkey, placing it gently onto a clean porcelain plate, adding a scoop of warm stuffing and sweet cranberry sauce. I pulled out a chair, settling him down comfortably. I handed him a silver fork and sat right next to him. I smoothed his hair back from his forehead, looking deeply into his innocent eyes. "Leo," I said softly, making sure he was giving me his full, undivided attention. "I want you to remember everything you saw here today. I want you to remember how loud and scary that woman acted when she tried to hurt you. But more importantly, remember what happened right after." Leo took a small bite of the turkey, chewing slowly. "You did not yell back, Mom," he observed astutely. "You just talked really quietly." "Exactly," I smiled, leaning in closer. "Bullies are just cowards who use loud noises and mean words to make themselves feel big. They want you to scream back. They want you to act crazy so they can pretend they are the victims. But true strength is quiet, Leo. True strength is knowing the facts, standing your ground, and never letting a bully dictate your emotions. You never have to tolerate someone hurting you. You are smart, you are brave, and you own the ground you stand on. Do you understand me?" Leo nodded, a genuine, bright smile finally breaking through the fear on his face. "I understand, Mom. This is my house now." "Yes, it is," I agreed, kissing his cheek, "and we are going to fill it with good people." Heavy footsteps pounded down the grand wooden staircase, interrupting our peaceful moment. David dragged two bulging black garbage bags behind him. His expensive suit ruined his face, pale and completely devoid of hope. Beatrice followed, sobbing violently, clutching a single plastic bag filled with whatever silk dresses she could frantically shove inside. The police officers marched right behind them, ensuring they did not try to steal anything on their way out to the front door. Chloe was the last one to descend. She was struggling to carry her heavy garbage bag, her high heels catching on the edges of the stairs. She reached the bottom step and stopped dead in her tracks. She looked at the open front door where the freezing Chicago wind was blowing inside. She looked at her mother, who was weeping pathetically on the porch. She looked at her brother, who was facing decades in federal prison. And then she looked across the room at Marcus. Marcus stood tall, composed, and financially secure. He represented safety, stability, and wealth. The exact things Chloe was about to lose forever. Chloe dropped her black garbage bag onto the floor. She sprinted across the foyer, her heels clicking frantically against the wood. She threw herself at Marcus, grabbing onto his strong right arm with both of her trembling hands, tears streaming down her ruined face. "Marcus, please," she begged, her voice cracking with sheer desperation. "Please, you have to save me. I cannot go out there. I have nothing. You are my own husband, Marcus. You promised to take care of me. Please do not let them throw me away like trash." Marcus looked down at the pale, trembling hands clutching his sleeve. He did not show an ounce of pity or warmth. His expression remained carved from granite, entirely indifferent to the sobbing woman clinging to him. Slowly and deliberately, he reached over and peeled her fingers off his jacket. He dropped her hands as if touching her disgusted him. Chloe stumbled back, her eyes wide with shock. "Marcus, please," she whimpered. "You did not want a husband," Chloe, Marcus stated, his voice slicing through the tense air of the foyer. "You wanted a prop. You wanted a quiet, educated black man you could parade around your country club to prove how modern and progressive the Sterling family was. But the second we were behind closed doors, You let your mother hide the silverware when my parents visited. You sat there silently while your friends made disgusting jokes about my neighborhood. And tonight you had the absolute audacity to call a 9-year-old boy a stray dog polluting your purebred home. I am sorry, Chloe sobbed, stepping forward again. I was just upset. I did not mean any of it. I love you. You love my bank account, Marcus corrected, stepping back to maintain his distance. You love the safety I provide. When you thought you had your grandfather's $20 million trust fund, you were perfectly happy to scream at me and demand I leave. You told me I was nothing without your family name. You reminded me that you elevated me to polite society. But now that the money is gone, now that your mother is a proven fraud and your brother is facing federal prison, suddenly I am your savior. Suddenly I am your own husband. Chloe fell to her knees, weeping into her hands. The local police officers watched without a shred of sympathy, simply waiting for her to gather her trash bag and leave. I filed for divorce this morning. Marcus continued his tone, carrying a brutal finality. I am keeping our house because my name is the only one on the mortgage. I am keeping my assets because I earned them through my own sweat. You have absolutely nothing coming to you, Chloe. You can take your trash bag, and you can walk out that door with your fraudulent family. Do not ever contact me again. Marcus turned his back on his weeping wife. He walked deliberately across the room, leaving the shattered remains of his marriage behind him. He stepped up to the dining table and stood firmly beside me and Leo, forming an impenetrable wall of protection. We were the outsiders, the ones the Sterling family had deemed unworthy. Now we were the only ones left standing in the warm house. Chloe let out a pathetic wail. She crawled toward her black garbage bag, grabbed the cheap plastic strings, and dragged it toward the front door. She stepped out into the freezing Chicago wind, joining Beatrice, who was shivering violently on the front porch. David watched this entire scene unfold from the base of the staircase. His tailored suit was completely ruined, soaking wet and stained with dirt from the floor. His perfectly styled hair hung in limp, greasy strands across his forehead. He looked at his mother crying on the porch. He looked at his sister dragging a garbage bag into the cold. He looked at the federal investigators who were packing up their briefcases, having successfully served the asset freeze injunctions. Then David looked at me. I was sitting comfortably at my beautiful dining table feeding my son warm turkey. I was calm, safe, and entirely victorious. Something inside David completely snapped. The invisible tether, holding his sanity together, broke with a violent, silent snap. The reality of his situation crashed over him with the weight of a collapsing skyscraper. He was not a wealthy CEO. He was not a Sterling. He was a broke, sterile fraud, facing decades in a brutal federal prison facility. He had lost his mistress, his reputation, his home, and his future. And I was the architect who designed his absolute ruin. I had orchestrated every single detail of his downfall while pretending to be his loyal, oblivious wife. A dark, terrifying shadow fell over David's face. His eyes went completely dead, devoid of any human reason or restraint. His breathing turned ragged and shallow, his chest heaving as if he were suffocating. The local police officers were momentarily distracted by Chloe stumbling out the front door, and the federal agents were turning their backs to leave. No one was looking directly at David except me. David let out a low, guttural snarl that sounded like a wounded animal. He shoved his right hand deep into the pocket of his ruined suit trousers. When his hand emerged, he was gripping a heavy silver object. It was a sharp antique letter opener he had apparently grabbed from his upstairs office while hastily packing his belongings. The long, pointed metal blade gleamed dangerously under the bright dining room lights. "You ruined my entire life!" David screamed, his voice cracking with pure homicidal rage. "You took everything away from me, Valerie. If I am going to prison, I am making sure you never get to enjoy this house." Without another single word of warning, David violently launched himself off the bottom stair. He charged across the large foyer with terrifying speed, his expensive leather shoes slipping slightly on the cold, wet floor before finally catching traction. He raised the sharp silver blade high above his head, his face twisted into a grotesque mask of pure, unadulterated madness. He was not aiming for my arms or my legs. He was aiming directly for my chest, completely intending to end my life right there in the ruined dining room. He lunged furiously toward me and my young son Leo, his entire physical body completely fueled by pure blind hatred as the deadly sharp metal tip rushed forward to finally strike. The sharp metal tip rushed forward to finally strike. I did not even have time to scream before a blur of motion intercepted the attack. Marcus moved with the speed of a trained professional. He launched his muscular frame directly into David's path, colliding with the frantic man mid-stride. The physical impact was deafening. Marcus hit David directly in the ribs, wrapping his arms around the desperate fraud and driving him violently into the wet hardwood floor. The heavy silver letter opener flew out of David's hand instantly. It clattered across the ruined dining room, sliding safely out of reach. David hit the ground with a sickening thud, all the air knocked out of his lungs in a single rush. But the madness had taken over his brain. He thrashed wildly underneath Marcus, kicking and clawing, trying desperately to reach for my throat. Marcus easily overpowered him, pinning David's arms securely behind his back and pressing his knee firmly between David's shoulder blades. "Stay down!" Marcus roared, his voice shaking the remaining crystal. "You are done, David." The local police officers and federal investigators reacted immediately. Weapons were drawn in a fraction of a second. The lead officer sprinted across the foyer, pointing his service weapon directly at the struggling man on the floor. "Stop resisting," the officer commanded, shouting over David's manic screaming. "Put your hands flat on your back right now, or we will use absolute maximum force." Marcus wisely rolled off David, stepping back with his hands raised to let the armed officers take complete control. Two police officers threw their body weight onto David, aggressively securing his wrists. The cold, sharp click of steel handcuffs echoing in the dining room was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was the definitive sound of absolute justice. David continued to thrash and scream, his face pressed hard against the wet floorboards, soaked in spilled water and crushed white rose petals. "Let me go!" David shrieked, his voice cracking into a pathetic sob. "She stole my entire life. You cannot arrest me. I am a wealthy man. I will sue every single one of you for everything you own." The federal investigator simply shook her head, putting her weapon back into its holster. "You are not a chief executive officer anymore, Mr. Sterling," she stated with icy professional detachment. "You are an unemployed fraud facing decades of federal prison time for massive corporate embezzlement. And now you can officially add attempted murder and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon to your rapidly growing list of severe felony charges. Read him his rights, officer." The commotion inside the house had drawn the attention of the two women shivering out on the front porch. Beatrice stumbled back through the open doorway, her cheap plastic garbage bag dropping from her trembling hands. She let out a piercing scream as she witnessed her precious golden child being roughly hauled to his feet by heavily armed police officers. David Beatrice wailed, rushing forward. "What are you doing to my beautiful boy? Let him go immediately. You are making a terrible mistake." A federal agent stepped smoothly into Beatrice's path, blocking the frantic woman from reaching the prisoner. "Step back right now, Mom," the agent warned, raising a hand. "Your son just attempted to stab a woman and a child in cold blood. He is under federal and local arrest. If you interfere, you will be placed in handcuffs right beside him." Beatrice collapsed against the doorframe, weeping uncontrollably, as the officers dragged a thrashing David across the foyer. The grand illusion of the untouchable Sterling legacy was dead and buried, completely destroyed by their own greed. Beatrice watched helplessly as her fake heir, the man she used to steal her late husband's fortune, was marched out into the freezing Chicago wind in steel handcuffs. David looked back at his mother, his eyes wide with pure terror. "Mom, do something!" David begged, his voice fading as he was shoved roughly into the back of a waiting police cruiser. "Call the lawyers! Please do not let them take me away!" The heavy car door slammed shut, cutting off his desperate pleas entirely. The red and blue lights flashed brightly, illuminating the sheer devastation on Beatrice's aged face. Her ultimate insurance policy was gone forever. The lead police officer turned to me, checking to ensure Leo and I were unharmed. "Are you all right, ma'am?" the officer asked. "We will need you at the station tomorrow to provide a formal statement. For tonight, you are safe. We are clearing the premises right now." I nodded, pulling Leo close against my side. "We are fine, officer. Thank you for protecting my son." The officers escorted the federal agents out of the house. They turned their attention to Beatrice and Chloe, who were huddled together on the freezing concrete steps, clutching their black garbage bags. The lead officer grabbed the heavy brass handle of the grand oak front door. "You ladies need to vacate the perimeter of this property immediately," the officer instructed firmly. "The eviction is complete and you are officially trespassing. Have a good night." The officer pulled the heavy door shut, and the loud click of the deadbolt locking from the outside echoed with absolute finality. I stood in the quiet foyer listening to the police cruisers driving away, leaving Beatrice and Chloe shivering violently on the curb. The house was silent. Marcus let out a heavy sigh, turning to give me a tired smile. We had won. Suddenly, the profound silence of the secure house was shattered by a sharp electronic noise. My mobile phone, resting on the edge of the dining table, began to ring loudly. I walked over and looked down at the bright screen, expecting to see a call from my corporate lawyers. Instead, the caller ID displayed a completely unknown, restricted number. I slowly picked up the phone and answered the incoming call with absolute calm and profound confidence. I slowly picked up the phone and answered the incoming call with absolute calm and profound confidence. "Hello," I said. A professional voice introduced himself as the lead federal prosecutor assigned to the corporate embezzlement case against my former husband. He wanted to confirm I was completely safe and informed me David was officially booked into federal custody without bail. I thanked him, ended the call, and took a deep breath of the quiet air filling my newly reclaimed home. 1 month later, the bright morning sun streamed warmly through the bay windows of our dining room. The shattered crystal, ruined silk, and ugly stains from that chaotic Thanksgiving night were gone. In their place sat a beautiful custom oak table, where my son Leo and I were enjoying a peaceful, quiet breakfast. Leo was happily eating a plate of warm homemade waffles, his face bright and completely free of the terrible anxiety that plagued him whenever David was around. The massive house felt incredibly light. It no longer carried the suffocating toxic weight of the Sterling family and their endless, exhausting demands for absolute perfection. We were finally breathing free, clean air. A cheerful knock echoed from the heavy front door, pulling me from my peaceful thoughts. I walked over and opened it to find Marcus standing on the front porch, holding a white cardboard box from our favorite local bakery. He wore a relaxed gray cashmere sweater and dark jeans, looking 10 years younger than he did when he was trapped in a miserable marriage with Chloe. "Come on in, Marcus." I smiled, stepping aside to let the towering tax lawyer enter the warm, inviting foyer. He handed the pastry box to Leo, who grinned widely, and immediately opened it to grab a massive chocolate croissant. Marcus poured himself a mug of hot black coffee from the kitchen counter and leaned comfortably against the smooth marble island. Over the past 4 weeks, Marcus and I had forged a truly remarkable friendship. We were the two outcasts, the people the Sterling family had constantly belittled and severely underestimated. Now we were the only ones who had emerged from the spectacular wreckage completely unscathed and financially victorious. It felt incredibly good to have a genuine, solid ally in the house, someone who understood exactly what it took to survive that toxic environment and dismantle it from the inside out. We stood in the sunlit kitchen, sipping our hot coffee and enjoying the serene morning atmosphere. "I have an interesting update from the federal prosecutor," Marcus said, his deep voice carrying a distinct note of deep satisfaction. "David's expensive legal team tried to file an emergency motion for bail yesterday afternoon. The federal judge took one single look at his flight risk profile, the forged banking documents, and the violent assault charges from Thanksgiving, and laughed them right out of the courtroom. David is currently rotting in a maximum security holding cell, eagerly awaiting his official federal trial." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee, letting the sweet taste of absolute justice wash completely over me. He really thought his fake Sterling bloodline would magically save him from federal prison, I remarked, shaking my head at the sheer ridiculous delusion. Marcus chuckled darkly, adjusting his stance. The corporate board completely erased him from their company history. They seized every single one of his luxury company vehicles, canceled his elite club memberships, and publicly denounced him in a brutal media press release. He is facing up to 30 years in federal prison for the embezzlement alone. Throw in the attempted armed assault against you and Leo, and David is never going to see the outside of a prison cell again. And what about the wicked stepmother and the golden sister? I asked, raising an inquisitive eyebrow. I knew you had some private investigators keeping a distant, watchful eye on them just to ensure they did not violate the strict restraining orders. Marcus smiled, a predatory, entirely satisfied smile, revealing his perfect white teeth. That is absolutely the best part of the morning update, Valerie. Beatrice and Chloe were completely blacklisted by every single wealthy friend and high society connection they ever had. When the undeniable truth about Beatrice's 35-year-old secret affair and her massive offshore gambling debts leaked to the exclusive country club, they became instant social pariahs overnight. No one would lend them a single dime. They were violently forced to pawn their few remaining pieces of jewelry just to afford a filthy rundown motel room on the extreme dangerous outskirts of the city. To pay their weekly motel rent, Chloe is working the grueling graveyard shift at a greasy fast food diner. Beatrice, the arrogant woman who used to cruelly fire maids for using the wrong brand of silver polish, is now scrubbing public toilets as a minimum wage housekeeper at a budget laundromat. The absolute poetic justice of their miserable new reality was almost overwhelming to fully comprehend. They got exactly what they deserved. They built their entire miserable lives on a hollow foundation of cruel elitism and relentless psychological manipulation, I said, looking affectionately over at Leo, who was happily oblivious to our dark conversation, reading a colorful comic book at the dining table. Now they have to actually work for a miserable living. Suddenly, a sharp chime broke the quiet, relaxing atmosphere. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my mobile phone, looking down at the bright glowing screen. It was an urgent, high-priority notification from my secure offshore banking application. I opened the highly encrypted message and felt my heart skip a sudden heavy beat. The corporate lawyers had fully finalized the aggressive financial clawback protocol. The notification confirmed that the final massive liquidation of David's fraudulent assets had officially cleared directly into my personal account. We finally had everything we could ever need to rebuild our lives. I looked at Marcus and smiled a genuine happy smile. Perfect. Perfect, I repeated. The money was final proof the nightmare was over. They had used immense wealth to destroy anyone challenging their fragile egos. Now that wealth was in my account, stripped from their greedy hands. Marcus smiled, raising his mug in a toast to our victory. Looking at him, I realized how my definition of family had shifted over the past month. When I married David, I thought I was joining a grand legacy. I thought bloodlines and estates held a family together. I was naive. Beatrice and Chloe shared David's blood, and they were perfectly willing to watch him destroy his own life as long as it protected their social status. Blood did not make them loyal. It just made them complicit. True family. I realized looking from Marcus to my son Leo was not about genetics. True family is about who steps in front of a shattered crystal vase to protect you. True family is the person who risks their prestigious career to expose a massive financial fraud because it is the right thing to do. Marcus and I were the outsiders. We were the commoners, the stray dogs they thought they could easily kick out into the cold. Instead, we became each other's strongest allies. We built a fortress of mutual respect that their toxic generational wealth could never ever penetrate. I set my mobile phone down on the smooth marble counter and took a deep breath. Marcus, I said, my voice steady and filled with a brand new profound purpose. I have been thinking a lot about what to do with this massive financial settlement. It is tens of millions of dollars, far more than Leo and I will ever need to live comfortably. I refuse to let David's dirty stolen money just sit idle in an offshore account. I want to transform it into something powerful. I want to build a weapon against people exactly like the Sterlings. Marcus leaned forward, his dark eyes shining with genuine intrigue. I am listening, Valerie. What exactly is the grand plan? I am going to open a legal aid foundation. I announced, the vision crystallizing perfectly in my mind. A massive, fully funded foundation dedicated exclusively to protecting women and children who are trapped in financially and emotionally abusive households. There are thousands of women out there who stay with manipulative monsters like David simply because they do not have the financial resources to fight back. They stay because their toxic in-laws threaten to ruin them. They stay because they cannot afford the ruthless corporate litigators that wealthy abusers use to crush them in court. I'm going to level the playing field. I am going to use David's fraudulent dividends to hire the best lawyers in Chicago and provide them to victims entirely free of charge. Marcus set his coffee mug down, a wide, brilliant smile breaking across his handsome face. Valerie, that is absolutely brilliant. That is the ultimate revenge. You are taking the Sterling Empire's stolen money and using it to systematically dismantle other abusers just like them. If you are serious about setting up this foundation, you are going to need a ruthless senior tax partner to manage the charitable trust and handle the complex legal structuring. Consider me officially hired. I laughed, feeling a profound weight lift off my shoulders. I would not want anyone else for the job, Marcus. Over the next several months, we worked tirelessly to bring the foundation to life. We purchased a beautiful, secure building in downtown Chicago, transforming it into a safe haven for desperate families. We hired top-tier family law attorneys, forensic accountants, and trauma therapists. We named it the Lionheart Coalition, a subtle tribute to my brave son, Leo. Every single day I walked into that building and watched terrified, vulnerable women realize they finally had the power and the financial backing to escape their abusers. I watched children who had been silenced by fear finally find their voices. Every single victory we secured in court felt like washing away another stain left behind by the Sterling family. That evening, I returned to my peaceful estate. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow across the quiet neighborhood. I walked into the living room and found Leo sitting comfortably on the plush sofa, working on a complicated puzzle. He looked up when I entered, his eyes bright and entirely free of the nervous anxiety that used to haunt him when David lived here. He jumped up and ran across the room, throwing his arms tightly around my waist. "Welcome home, Mom," Leo said, hugging me fiercely. I wrapped my arms around his small shoulders, burying my face in his soft hair. I closed my eyes, holding him securely against me. He was completely safe. I was totally safe. We were finally and absolutely free. The house was perfectly quiet, filled only with the sound of our steady breathing. There was no more walking on eggshells. There was no more fearing a sudden violent outburst over a spilled glass of water. The journey from that terrifying Thanksgiving dinner to this beautiful, peaceful moment was the hardest thing I have ever endured, but it taught me a valuable lesson I will carry for the rest of my life. Never let anyone tell you that you are less than because you do not share their blood or their bank account. If they threaten to throw you out into the freezing cold, you must build your own fire. If they try to silence you, make sure your voice echoes. You have the power to audit your own life. Look closely at the people surrounding you. Look at the facts, not the illusions they project. When you finally stop accepting their lies, you will realize exactly how much power you truly possess. You are the architect of your own legacy. Build it with truth, build it with courage, and never apologize for taking out the trash. The most powerful lesson from Valerie's story is that true family is never defined by toxic bloodlines or generational wealth, but by mutual respect, loyalty, and protection. For years, the Sterlings weaponized their status to diminish her, mistaking her silent endurance for weakness. However, she proved that taking back your power doesn't require screaming or sinking to an abuser's level. It requires setting cold, calculated boundaries and having the courage to stop accepting their lies. By walking away from a toxic environment, she built her own safe haven. Have you ever had to cut ties to protect your peace? Share your story and comment below.